Deconstruction. An Introduction to the Criticism and the Inherent Oppression Within. An English 121 production by Michael Samuel. Part 1. Forms of Oppression. What are they? The 4 I's of oppression are as follows. Ideological oppression, which is the idea that one group is somehow better or more advanced than another, and thus has the right to control them. This is the most general form of oppression, and serves as the basis for all others. Institutional oppression, where policies or practices at the organizational level promote or perpetuate oppression. Institutional oppression does not have to be intentional. Interpersonal oppression, simply put, this is what racists do to their targets: stereotyping, harassments, threats, etc. Internalized oppression. This form of oppression primarily targets the oppressed themselves. Being told that one is inferior constantly will eventually internalize that and cause them to believe it. It should be fairly clear from the bleed over in definitions that none of the 4 I's can exist separately. Rather, they are an interconnected system. The bleed over explained. To demonstrate, let's discuss a well-known supremacist group, the KKK. The KKK are proponents of oppression, but what type? They believe themselves smarter and better than others, and as such, ideological is given. They are also an organization with many of their ideals being oppressive, therefore institutional is present as well. Oppression in academia. There is an inherent institutional oppression in academic fields. Information is often hard to access for those individuals who do not attend a college or university. Much of what is covered in this presentation falls under that facet of oppression. Part 2. Literary criticisms. What are they? A literary criticism is essentially an opinion, supported by evidence, and relating to theme, style, setting, or historical or political context. Further explained, literary criticism is the evaluation of literary works. It asks what literature does and what it is worth, and it's the method by which any given work is interpreted through a variety of methods or lenses. Each lens an analyzer views the work through is rife with its own flaws and prejudices. No perfect lens exists, and each of them has some oppressive element within. Deconstruction is one of the aforementioned lenses. But to understand it, we must first examine its predecessor, Structuralism. Part 3. Structuralism. What is it? Structuralism is a method of analysis that focuses on recurring patterns of thought and behavior in literature to deduce meaning. Components of Structuralism. Structuralism suggests that in every literary word system there are 2 base levels. First, surface structure, which is a physical and observable constant in conscious activity. Second, deep structure, which is abstract, invisible, and subject to principles that lay beneath the surface structure. Beliefs of Structuralism. Structuralists believe that humans perceive the world as a result of the conceptual framework that is inherent in our consciousness, that the world is created according to these structures. Through language, beliefs are conveyed and humans perceive the world, which in turn structures human experiences. Structuralists believe that everything must have meaning, and anything that they find possessing none is called deviant. This is a form of institutional oppression. Don't get it? I don't blame you. Here are some examples. P-E-A-R, spelling pear. The letters in this exact form evoke the mental image of a pear. Here's another example. What is this image? It's a stop sign, but how did we know without the word? We knew because our minds have learned to associate this appearance or surface structure with that of a stop sign. The deeper structure here would be what the sign represents, mainly a stoppage, the end of the road, or a turn onto a busy street. Langue and parole. A Swiss linguist by the name of Ferdinand de Saussure examined language as it changed over time, and developed further rules of language, focusing on signage. He called them langue and parole. Langue refers to the system of a language, the order by which it is spoken, and the regulations that form its basis. Parole is the physical manifestation of langue, whether by speech or text. The chess analogy. In the context of a chess game, the rules constraining each of the different pieces can be considered the langue. Meanwhile, the moves each individual player makes is the parole. Part 4. Deconstruction. Here we go. Deconstructionism. Deconstruction is a theory which was developed and popularized by Jacques Derrida in opposition to structuralism. Derrida would argue with structuralist colleagues that language is neither impartial nor impersonal, and hence its use to state things as such is problematic. To get an idea of Derrida's philosophical mindset, here's an excerpt from his documentary in which he deconstructs philosophy.
Oui, on dit souvent, et les philosophes, quand ils commencent un cours de philosophie, commencent souvent par dire que la question « qu'est-ce que ?», la question de l'être, est la question inaugurale de la philosophie. Que tout a commencé en Grèce, quand des philosophes se sont demandé « ti esti », qu'est-ce que c'est que ? Ils se sont demandé quelle est l'essence de ceci ou cela, et que veut dire le mot « être ». Alors, cette tradition s'est prolongée naturellement, mais au fond, la première question sur la question qui s'est imposée à moi, à partir naturellement de lecture, je ne l'ai pas inventé. La première question sur la question était celle-ci, elle était double en quelque sorte. Premièrement, est-ce que, comme on le dit si souvent, jusqu'à Heidegger compris, est-ce que la forme questionnante est la forme absolument privilégiée ou par excellence de la philosophie? Autrement dit, est-ce que penser, c'est questionner, comme le disent souvent aussi les philosophes, hein? Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas, avant la question, de façon plus radicale, plus ancienne, plus profonde, un mouvement de pensée qui n'est pas questionnant, mais qui est au contraire une affirmation. Alors ça, c'est la première question sur la question qui s'est imposée à moi. Et ensuite, à supposer même que la première question de la philosophie concerne l'être, qu'est-ce que c'est, qu'est-ce que l'être, qu'est-ce que l'essence de ceci ou cela, que veut dire le mot être, est-ce qu'il n'y a pas un présupposé dans la façon dont on comprend l'être?
Deconstruction is a method of analysis which emphasizes the internal workings of language and conceptual systems, the relational quality of meaning, and the assumptions implicit in forms of expression. The main goal of deconstruction. With other forms of literary analyses, the outcome is not always known, but the case is different with deconstruction. As Tim Nance said, deconstruction, where texts go to die. The goal of deconstruction is always for the conclusion at the end to prove that there is no meaning. As the end result is always known, all that matters is how you get there with the piece you are analyzing. Essentially, the goal is to undermine the parole by utilizing the langue, which should give it meaning, to instead destabilize it by way of binary opposition. Binary opposition as a system is when two theoretical opposites are strictly defined and set off against each other. A classic example of a binary opposition is the presence-absence dichotomy. Here is an example of the presence-absence dichotomy. Pictured here we see a sign on a store door that says, "Guide dogs only." A simple statement, and we can assume the intent is to forbid all animals except those guiding blind people. Therefore, our opposition is established between things that are allowed and things that are forbidden. Seeing eye dogs and regular dogs. However, upon closer scrutiny, it can be inferred that not only are all other types of animals forbidden, but also people. Only guide dogs are allowed. People are not mentioned. Or maybe this excludes blind people being guided by anything other than a trained dog, Perhaps a blind person guided by another person is not permitted. But wait, blind people can't read this, so really what does the sign mean? Who can say? Beliefs of deconstruction. Deconstructionists believe that language is ultimately flawed and that it cannot be used to perfectly communicate, no matter how much the words are refined and altered. The communication is in the end a failure. In this way it is somewhat satirical and points to an inherent flaw within the theory itself. If a piece is analyzed deconstructively and explained to the best of one's abilities, it is ultimately still a failure, as by the standards of deconstruction, nothing has been explained legibly. It is a complicated and abstract lens, and in this way it is an institutionally oppressive view to those who do not seek higher education. Thank you for your time.